I want to begin by just thanking you all for inviting me to be here. I love speaking to the Federalist Society. I do because I really do respect your tradition of openness and debate. I think these issues are some of the hardest issues that we deal with, and the fact that you don't caricaturize the issue, I think, is really important and serves a tremendously important goal in our shared democratic dialogue on these issues. Now, when Dean and David called me to ask if I'd come, I warned them. I said, listen, I'm going to basically give the most boring speech ever. So now I'm going to subject you to it. And the reason for that is two things. Number one is most or a good chunk of the issues you all want to discuss today are Guantanamo-related issues, and I recused myself from Guantanamo on the first day I got the job. So I haven't done any Guantanamo stuff, so I can't really talk about Guantanamo. And then there's a whole separate set of issues that are really trial court decisions, things like moving Khalid Sheikh Mohammed from Guantanamo to the United States. But my office, I work in the Office of the Solicitor General. We deal with appellate stuff. So so I can't really talk to you about that. That's a whole set of issues. But what I can talk to you about, and what I said that I'd be willing to, is to talk about an argument that I just had in the D.C. Circuit involving habeas corpus rights for the detainees held at Bagram Airfield in Afghanistan. I see this as, I think, a crucial set of issues facing the department, indeed facing the country, and it's a pending case, so I'm not going to do anything beyond just simply recite the arguments of our briefs and respond to any questions you might have at the end of it. So, as I say, I'm sorry it's going to be a little bit boring, but here we go. So the issue in the Bagram case, Bagram Airfield is an 8-square-mile base in kind of about 40 miles away from Kabul in the heart of war-torn Afghanistan. And the detainees there are several hundred of them, some of them asserted the right to habeas corpus, the right to basically come in and have a federal court decide whether or not they should be detained there. Judge Bates, an extremely well-respected district court judge, found that certain detainees at Bagram Airfield did have the right to habeas corpus. And we, the Justice Department, opposed that, and indeed the Congress of the United States in the Military Commission Act of 2006 said that no enemy combatant held anywhere in the world had the right to habeas corpus. Now, what the detainees have said in response to that is, yes, Congress has said that, but that statute passed by Congress, signed by the President, is unconstitutional, at least as applied to the people at Bagram Airfield, that there's a right of habeas corpus for these enemies. And so the argument that we are advancing is an argument that I think you just heard David telegraph a moment ago, that over American history, the right to habeas corpus is not extended to enemy combatants detained abroad. And I think Johnson versus Eisentrager, a 1950 Supreme Court case, is, I think, the best embodiment of that general principle. There you had individuals who were captured in China, who were working for the German government. This is at the end of World War II. They're captured, tried by a military commission, and then held at Landsberg prison in Germany. They then file habeas corpus petitions. And the Supreme Court, in an opinion by Justice Jackson, says that it was obvious that they wouldn't have habeas corpus rights. To do so would fetter military commanders and thrust federal courts into the vortex of difficult military decision-making. So that, I think, is the kind of standard principle. It has been for a long time. The sole wrinkle to that is the 2008 decision by the Supreme Court in the Boumediene case, which said that the individuals at Guantanamo did have a right to habeas corpus. And Judge Bates, for the district court, said that that principle of Boumediene isn't just limited to Guantanamo, but it's a more general principle that restrains government power generally. And we think that that's a problematic decision for a number of reasons. I think the most important one is that the Supreme Court in Boumediene took great care to point out that Guantanamo was, for all practical purposes, United States territory, that it was a place that the United States had full sovereignty, full de facto sovereignty and control over. Bagram Airfield is a completely different thing. When you go to Bagram Airfield, the first thing you see are two flags flying over the entrance, the American flag and the government of Afghanistan. I can assure you that nothing like that exists at Guantanamo. There's no Cuban flag flying alongside the United States flag. And it symbolizes the fact that we are in a partnership with the government of Afghanistan, that we see this, and President Bush, I think, most eloquently put it in his 2005 joint declaration with President Karzai, that we are in this shared enterprise together. We are there at the request of the Afghan government to root out terrorism and to promote stability in the region. That is very different than what is going on with the Cubans at Guantanamo. Indeed, the Supreme Court in the Boumediene decision, it was pointed out, it was uncontested that the United States exercised full de facto sovereignty over the area. The other thing about the Boumediene decision is Justice Kennedy's opinion for the court said that Guantanamo was a place that was far removed from a zone of active hostilities. And it said, the decision said that if it were a war zone, the question about habeas might have come out entirely differently. Well, I mean, I submit to you, I think that there's probably no place on earth that is less conducive to habeas corpus than a place like Bagram Airfield. I mean, this is a place in which our soldiers are being shot at. The detention facility where the individuals are held was itself shelled and attacked. When Vice President Cheney visited there 2 years ago, there was an attack on the airfield in which several Americans perished. This is not, Bagram. This is not Guantanamo, a place that you can go to, and really, Guantanamo does feel very much like a peaceful military base. Everything about Bagram Airfield, I think, is different. In addition, the whole way in which Bagram is set up is quite different than Guantanamo. There are 15 or so other nations who have active military presences at Bagram. It's part of a coalition force that is there to promote stability in the region. Guantanamo, of course, the United States is the only game in town. We certainly don't, generally respect what the Cuban government has to say about how we run our base at Guantanamo. Everything about what happens at Bagram is entirely different. Everything we're doing is done with a keen eye toward what the Afghan government reaction is and making sure that that joint partnership is maintained. Then the last thing I would say in closing about the differences between the two is that there's a really different history. Guantanamo became part of the United States, it became effectively United States control starting in 1898 when the United States held all of Cuba. And then in 1903, we ceded back to the government of Cuba the great vast majority of Cuba, but held back that square parcel of land, that parcel of land that is the Guantanamo Naval Base, and then we signed a lease that basically said that we would hold this piece of land indefinitely, that we'd pay something like $3,000 a month for this piece of land, which is bigger than Manhattan, as I understand it, and that this is the boon to anyone who has ever signed a lease and has been a tenant. It said that the only way this lease could ever be changed is by the mutual consent of both parties. So basically, we have this thing for $3,000 or whatever dollars forever, and only both parties can change the terms of that. Now, none of that is true about the lease at Bagram Airfield, which is a very different set of constraints, and I think recognizes the fact that this is an active zone of military hostilities. It's a war zone. And, regardless of what you might think about the Boumediene decision, and lots of people can disagree about that, I think that when you start extending that principle to other places, particularly war zones, you really do put the federal courts in a position where they have literally never historically been. So that's the argument of the case.